Um, I am happy to have him here, especially in the new year. We're joined with the one and only Daniel McAdams. Daniel, man, welcome to the show, man. How you doing this morning? You doing all right?
Good morning, Jamal. How are you? I'm sorry that I'm not as stressed as snazzily as you are this morning.
Well, I didn't initially used to dress this way. I started dressing this way when I did the first show because I thought, all right, this is the first show. I'm restarting it. Everything is great, and I want to look good for it. And the first week was just complete failure. Every show was screwed up. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be in a suit when I finally get the show right. And somewhere along the way, I just ended up liking it. And it
It's
was,
great.
I
It
just
looks great. It's just a little early for me, so I'm sorry about that.
no, I totally understand. It's early for both of us. Daniel McAdams, he is executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity, and a good friend of the show, man. I really do appreciate you joining me.
Thank you so
Um,
much. Happy New Year, by the way.
Happy New Year to you too. I'd be remiss if I didn't get your take on the New Orleans killer, um, driving a car, killing 15 people, getting out the car, shooting at the cops. Apparently, there was an ISIS flag in the back. He apparently put stuff out on social media about his intentions. You even had something that the feds, I guess, are looking into almost, I guess they're looking in a combination with the Tesla bomb that went off in front of Trump Tower. The guy that was in it, they say he was burned beyond recognition. So even though they think they know who he is, his identification apparently survived, but he was burned to a crisp. Give me your take on this. I mean, there's a weird dichotomy with this idea of this guy who killed all of these people are doing this in the name of ISIS, whereas the person and the group who we helped put into power in Syria was also a part of ISIS. It's a very bizarre thing. Give me your take. How do you frame this and just your thoughts about it? I'm not necessarily to dwell on it, but I'm curious on your take.
Well, my thoughts are that it's weird. Like you said, you used the right word. I mean, if I was gonna put together an operation and like check all the boxes that would make conspiracy theorists go nuts, this is what I would do. Okay, it's just like 9/11. Remember, the passport was the only thing that survived the Twin Towers, and everyone was like,
Mhm.
"Come on, man!" And this guy's burned to a crisp. The only thing that survives is his ID. Come on, man. The two guys have connections to Fort Bragg, plus the guy who tried to kill Trump. Come on,
So,
man.
yep.
Yeah, something is weird going on. I don't know if it's a psyop against us. Um, I don't know if it's MK Ultra. I mean, I was kidding with my children earlier because we watched a show where that's a features into it, and I said, "Well, here we go, MK Ultra." I mean, I don't know, but there are so many weird things about this that it can't be by accident. I don't think.
Yeah, it's bizarre to put it mildly. I mean, apparently even the gun was burned, but again, somehow the ID. And one of the people pointed out that he was still supposed to be on active duty,
Yeah.
like that he could have effectively set a bomb. He didn't necessarily need to be in a truck. So why on earth was he in the truck?
And a
And
Tesla,
then to be
a
burned
Tesla at that.
so right, I'm sorry, right, the Tesla, and to be burned to such a degree where they can't necessarily identify the body. It's oh man. And then for this to happen outside of Trump's towers, apparently he was a Ukraine fanatic, just like the other Ukraine fanatic that tried to kill Trump.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know what they think about it. I mean, apparently they said that.
Ukraine's. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, 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 go for it. I was just saying it's there's so many links to Ukraine in this, and even Fico, if you think about it, where they tried to murder Robert Fico, and he still to this day blames Ukraine for that. All of this having to do with his take and policy against the war. But please give me your take.
Yeah, I was just going to say that he loves Ukraine, but he also apparently loves Trump too, or like Trump at least a lot. It's bizarre. The only thing that I could think that makes some sense is that apparently from what I read, and I mean my first default now always is everything that we see reported on this is a lie because it
Mhm.
always is. So at least from what I've read, he was involved in training Ukrainian soldiers over in Germany where he was stationed. Now, if
Mhm.
that's the case, there are a lot of reasons. He is actually wearing a T-shirt for the Ukrainian extremists, Slava Ukraini. Um, so You take some guy like that, you get him involved in training these people. They probably spend a lot of time together. They tell them a bunch of stories. They tell them, their side of the propaganda. And maybe some of these guys don't have the strongest minds. They take it on board. They become indoctrinated into it, and then they act on that. That's 1,000% speculation on my part. But it just shows the danger of the U.S. going around training other armies overseas, whether or not it's active in this case or not. It's just something we shouldn't be doing.
1,000% agree. And weirdly enough, I'm going to get your take on this part too. There was a reporter that was allowed, I guess, to go into the New Orleans Jabbar, I believe his last name is, from the New York Post.
If we walk through
I've never seen anything like this, but they're going into this is
inside the New Orleans terrorist home. You can see that it's been clearly destroyed, the door, at least from the FBI raid yesterday. But if we walk through the home, we see some signs of what he was up to. He had this work area here, lots of different chemicals splayed around, and different electronics. This is, again, a work setup.
So they're trying to say that this was some kind of bomb making enterprise. I don't remember them finding bombs, though. That was another weird part in the media report. They said, well, it seemed, because initially they thought that there were multiple people involved, which again, even that would have been weird. Yeah. Because they were saying that they found somebody, or they thought someone was setting bombs. And it's like, okay, what do you mean appears to be dropping bombs? Either it's a bomb or it's not. You can, if you see the guy doing it, certainly you can go to the location, pick it up and look at whether or not it's a bomb. So I thought the reporting was weird. And then they said at one point he was thinking about killing his entire family and then decided, no, I have a better idea. I'm just going to kill as many people as I possibly can. Did they find any bombs with this?
Not, excuse me, not that I know, but I looked at that clip you just put up and I'm just shaking my head like, what that blank? Because let's get this straight. This is an active crime scene. The FBI raided the house, yet somehow they let some dopey reporter in. Looks like there's some chemicals here. Let's check it out. I mean, you can watch TV crime movies and they're more careful than this. So either the FBI is colossally stupid in allowing a journalist in, or there's something else going on. They want some kind of story to get out, and that's why they let this journalist in. I've never heard of a journalist being allowed to wander around by herself in an active crime scene where an act of terrorism was committed. That's astonishing to me.
Agreed. And everybody on social media was effectively saying the same thing. Like, what the hell is this? Like, why? Like, how? What are they trying to get across in allowing this story to come out in the way it came out? And by the way, they did the same thing with Clarissa Ward, the one who on CNN effectively staged going into a jail several days after the terrorists had already let everybody out the jails. And it's like, hey, there's a guy here. And got the guy's name wrong, got who the guy was wrong. The guy had a manicure. He was in clean clothing. He was chubby. Like, meaning none of this came across as if this man had been sitting in a jail for 4 months without seeing the sunlight and all of this other nonsense. They have been putting this stuff up over and over and over again for the American public as if they're trying to get the public into a certain mindset.
Yeah.
It's just strange to me.
If she wants to find someone who's been sitting in jail for a long time, maybe she should go over to Gaza, find out what they really look like after they've been sitting in a torture chamber for months and months at a time. No, she won't do that. This is the photo op.
Yeah, they don't want to do that part. One of the reporting, or some reporting came out recently that Joe Biden was looking to attack Iran, and that apparently he was looking at the missile weapons factories, basically the nuclear missile silos and those type of things that Joe Biden was considering strikes. Now, this piggybacks on Donald Trump, who at this point seems like he's going to be running a pressure campaign against Iran also. How far do you think they're going to go with this? I mean, even with Donald Trump, do you think Donald Trump really is going to drag this country into a war against Iran on behalf of Israel?
Well, the first part about Joe Biden, I mean, you look at what actually happened. It was Jake Sullivan who went to President Biden and said, hey, I got a great idea. Why don't we do this? And Biden is like, we already know the guy's, he's lost it. So it's it's just another example of the fact that he hasn't run anything for 4 years. It's been these people behind him. They all have backgrounds with the left neocons like Hillary and the others. And they're the ones that have set the entire world on fire, from Syria to Gaza to Ukraine. I mean, this is the most evil group of people that we've seen in a few decades. Let's put it that way. And here they are, like, let's do this now. Here's a great idea. This will work out well for us. It's pretty amazing and pretty disgusting as to what Trump is going to do. Now, I hope that he does the right thing and sees that there are better ways of dealing with Iran than threatening and pressure. He already did maximum pressure. It didn't work. In fact, it had the opposite effect, as it turned Iran to look for new allies. And I think either today or sometime in the next couple of days, they're going to sign a very comprehensive security agreement, partnership with Russia. So that was U.S. policy that drove Iran toward Russia. And if the U.S. if you continue a bad policy that's having the opposite result of what you want, well, you're going to get more of it. I mean, I'm not a rocket scientist, but even I can figure that out. So if he's going to go down that path, well, he's going to get more of the same. What concerns me is that to the person, his team of foreign policy advisors are rabid Iran hawks. Now, I get it. You got to have a couple of neocons in there. You got to please the people who paid for your campaign. However, it would have been smarter, in my opinion, to have some people with opposite views who are more realist in foreign policy. Let them duke it out. You sit in the middle and make a decision. I thought that was how Donald Trump ran his businesses. It's too bad that he's not running his administration that way, because I think it would have served America a lot better than the team that he has right now.
What's wild about it, I've heard clips where Donald Trump talked about Israel, where he talked about meeting, I believe, Mahmoud Abbas and meeting Netanyahu, and how, for the most part, he didn't like Netanyahu. This was years before he was fully into politics, and how the Palestinians seemed like they were open for a deal. Netanyahu was not. Fast forward to a decade, complete 180, just complete difference in regards to the way he sees it. Meaning, at 3 a.m. between him and his God, he knows what's true or what's most likely to be true. But politically speaking, he has taken a very different tact in regards to the way that he's been moving in his direction. I mean, you've worked with Ron Paul, who's been an honest actor in this stuff. Whether you agree or disagree with Ron Paul, he has been one of those principal politicians who stuck to his guns in regards to who he was and what his principles were. I mean, how did he deal with this? I mean, I would imagine he had to deal with these groups and these people who had these kind of political affiliations purely through issues of cash or monetary or some other kind of issue of leverage. How did he navigate this himself? And how, I don't know what's going on behind the veil that gets these people this wed to this Israeli issue. What's the reality of this?
The thing is that the other members of Congress, they make it more difficult for themselves, and it's not necessary. If you operate according to principles, it's easy. And the person who's doing it right now in the House is Thomas Massie. He says, "Look, I'm not against Israel. I just don't vote for foreign aid. I'm against foreign aid for everyone on principle." And if you do it that way, they don't bother you. And I would be sitting in on meetings when Dr. Paul would meet, and it didn't happen very often, but with some kind of Israel-oriented group that was in our district. And he would just be honest and say, "Look, I understand where you guys are coming from. I understand what your views are. But let me tell you, I just don't vote for foreign aid. I wish them well. I wish I hope you guys are successful, whatever. But I don't vote for foreign aid, so I'm not going to vote for it." And they would say, "Okay, I disagree with, fair enough. I understand. You don't, it's not that you hate Israel. You just don't like foreign aid." And it worked remarkably well. I saw it work over and over. Not everyone was happy, but it was understandable.
Mm-hmm. When you're looking at the world starting in 2025, if you had to do this kind of appraisal of world order, and I know that's somewhat of a big question. I guess we can isolate it to either Syria, Russia, Ukraine, any way you want to isolate it to. How do you view the start of 2025 as we move into the year?
Chaos. We're in a chaotic international order. And the danger is that the U.S. so-called experts don't understand this. They still think it's the world of 2016 or 1999, where we're on top. We're going to dictate the rules, and you guys are going to do what we say. That world is gone. We don't have the economic power, as we've seen with the Ukraine war. We don't have the military power. We've thrown everything we could at Russia in this war, and it's not been successful. Every wonder weapon after every wonder weapon, U.S. trainers, U.S. involvement, U.S. targeting, U.S. intel, it hasn't changed the course of the war. So we don't have the kind of economic power, the kind of military power, and we also don't have the kind of diplomatic power to push U.S. interests overseas, because the State Department has been weaponized, and it started a long time ago, but Hillary Clinton sure was good at weaponizing the State Department. And then we had Pompeo and all these other dopes involved. So we don't have the kind of power, we don't have the kind of moral authority, the hypocrisy of our support for Israel's slaughter in Gaza, and our hypocrisy over supporting Al Qaeda in Syria. I mean, this has undermined our moral authority. So the world has changed fundamentally. A lot of it is the fault of these same people getting everything wrong, but they still don't see it. They still go along thinking that we're in the driver's seat. And that's a dangerous situation, you know?
I agree with you. Go into why it's dangerous. Because I 1,000% agree with you. Is it in chess? We used to have this thing of, if you try to win a drawing game, you're going to lose it. Like, if you don't have, let's say, the material capabilities to accomplish what you are trying to accomplish, then you're going to come up with deficits. You're going to over commit. You're going to overreact because you don't have the capabilities of doing it in a typical way that will be done. It often ends up being a lost game, even if at one point it was a draw. Is that the thought? Is that why you're saying, well, yeah, this is dangerous? We're trying to do something that we don't have the material capabilities to do.
Yeah, and I mean, because you make miscalculations when the input is not accurate, you make miscalculations. World War I and World War II, but especially World War I, miscalculation is primarily responsible for how the war broke out.
Right.
This side thought they were stronger than they actually were. The legendary story of the Poles riding across the plains on horses and getting mown down by machine guns. You have a distorted sense of your power and your moral and physical authority, and it butts heads with reality. It's very, very dangerous. So I think it causes the United States to be a more aggressive actor on the world scene than it should be.
But do you think that aggression is coming out of a certain sense of desperation? Like, where the U.S. feels its position is ebbing away. It feels like it's receding into the background. It looks around and it sees Russia, China, India, it sees all of these other countries that are getting much stronger, that are becoming more, let's say, economically diverse, have becoming more tightly knit with each other. And it doesn't necessarily believe that right off the bat that it can compensate for it. So it comes up with this kind of aggressive policy of trying to create chaos. So yeah, we're going to create chaos in Syria. Yeah, we're going to try to create chaos with Taiwan. We're going to create chaos with Ukraine. We're going to create chaos with North Korea and South Korea. Basically, if we can create chaos, then it allows us on some level to maintain control through that use of chaos. Or do you think there's something else that's the origin of this?
No, I think you're right, but I think, in addition to that, and that's an important point that you make, but Americans are such propagandized people. I think they're the most propagandized people on earth. Probably the North Koreans have more access to news, objective news, than the U.S. does. But the American people have been tricked into believing we always have to have an enemy scenario. Oh, those Dagon Chinese. Everything would be fine if it wasn't for those Russians. Oh, these. We always have to have this sort of enemy. And I think it's pathological. I think there's something wrong in the American psyche. And it's not that there's something wrong physically with Americans, but they've been propagandized so much. And they've also been propagandized to identify themselves and their families with the greatness and power of the state. We're number one. Rather than, I think certainly other countries, they would orient the greatness to how well they're doing in their lives, how financially stable they are, how happy their family is, how much time they have to spend with their family. So we've got a really distorted sense of priorities in the United States, and it's quite dangerous, I think. And I mean, one of the things that I've done for a long time in my anti-war activism is try to get Americans to understand that the warfare state has nothing to do with patriotism. It's the opposite of patriotism. It's picking your pockets to get rich, to make everyone else furious with us and want to attack us. That's not patriotic, man.
Agreed. Had you, well, I agree with you. Did you have any success in talking to Americans about it? Like when you're
Well,
having a conversation with somebody, do they intuitively get it? Or do they, is it, because look, I remember when I had my political awakening, all of this stuff was shocking to me. From my point of view at the time, well, America is morally correct. We're the good guys. Anything that happens in the world, we may make mistakes, but at the end of the day, we're trying to do what's right. And, when I had my political awakening, it was like, oh my God, I've been lied to. That was the way I felt. I've been lied to. How,
yeah,
when you were,
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
no, please, no.
I was just going to say mine came at after the first Iraq War because I was gung ho. I was still living in the Cold War mindset that I had been raised in, and I'm like, we're going to get those guys. How dare they do this, and we're still strong and we're still awesome. And then I just looked around and it helped that I moved overseas and spent the 90s overseas and started to understand that the U.S. foreign policy is not a force for good in the post-Cold War world. It's a force desperately trying to grab up all the power that it can. But that was my awakening. That's where I became anti-war after being embarrassed at being in favor of the first Iraq War, and then going overseas and seeing how stupid our foreign policy is.
What were you? Can I ask? What were you doing overseas?
I went over. I was finishing grad school. I had a job offer to work for the Gallup organization, setting up a political think tank, in the post-communist Hungary. I was working on it, setting up a think tank there. And so I stayed longer than the think tank lasted. So I ended up doing a lot of journalism. I was an editorial page editor of the Budapest Sun newspaper over there.
That's astonishing. Oh, that's a hell of an opportunity.
It was fun.
Oh, wow. What was okay, so you hit your head on this idea of, okay, this foreign policy is not to the best interest of Americans. This is not serving us in the way that this is operating. And then at that point, I would imagine at some point you came back to the US and you're working in law, or you're still continuing editorials. What was...
Well, what I was doing is I was traveling around Central and Eastern Europe with the Human Rights Organization. And I was still in the sort of white hat, black hat, America's going to support the anti-communists. We're going to support the good guys. And everywhere I went to do human rights monitoring, I could see that the U.S. government was in favor of the bad guys, the renamed communists, and this, like the nomenclatura kids, the kids whose dads were the commie torturers, and all of a sudden they were in Gucci, And I realized that we were supporting the bad guys, and that's when, and then we were careening toward war against Yugoslavia. And that's when I discovered Ron Paul. And here's a conservative Republican from Texas saying, what the heck are we bombing Serbia for? That makes no sense at all. And bing, it was like a light that went on, I'm
curious, do you see any change at all, or any even potential in change? Like, there seems to be this kind of odd polarity shift, and maybe it's not a polarity shift at all. But at the very least, there's elements of the right that seem to be more skeptical of these wars in a way that I haven't seen before. And the left seems to be all in on all of these wars in general. So it's a bit weird to me in the way that this polarity has shifted. But when you're looking at the winds of the world, do you see what area concerns you the most at this point?
Well, on this reorientation, it's very interesting because, on the Hill for 11 years with Dr. Paul, we worked a lot with the progressive left. I mean, we worked a lot against the Iraq War with them. And it was a very important force for us. And it was also very helpful because a lot of newspaper articles, the odd couple, Dennis Kucinich and Ron Paul. And it was good. I mean, we'll take it. We worked with Cynthia McKinney and all these great progressives. Yeah. And they've just gone. And it's very, very sad. Even someone like Barbara Lee, who we respect so much, she's been in favor of the Ukraine war. I mean, she's bitten the propaganda line. It's very sad to see. But that destruction of the progressive left is bad, and I hope it comes back. But you're right, there is some hope on the right. But I think that's why the gatekeepers are so desperate to get in there. And hey, I'm with you guys, but well, except for this, And so you're seeing a lot of that. You're seeing a lot of stuff shifting right now, which is probably good. It makes me frustrated that, as Dr. Paul would say, that we're not better messengers, that we're not better able to get in the game and make our point more successfully. But, all you can do is keep trying.
Yeah, the left has fundamentally fell apart, especially on the anti-war front. I remember I think they put out a message effectively saying, hey, we should work for a ceasefire in Ukraine. Within a week, they had retracted it because it got screamed down, in which case they pulled it back and just kind of walked it back. Last part, Syria. I wanted to get your take on that. I don't think I had you on since it fundamentally collapsed. When you are looking at the Middle East today, starting off in 2025, how do you frame that in your mind? I mean, at this point, Syria has been balkanized. The old power in Syria is fundamentally gone. Israel has taken a share of it. Turkey has taken a share of it. The terrorists clearly are working on behalf of Turkey as they take control of Syria. How do you frame this, like in regards to the shifting relationships in Syria? And I guess the other question is, do you think Syria is going to be able to maintain? Do you think Erdogan is going to be able to effectively swallow this whole and keep it together? Or do you think this is going to fundamentally collapse?
Yeah, I think it's the chaos. It's the party of chaos that's successful in Syria. And at first I was very frustrated. Assad may not have been, Saint Assad, but he did keep Christians and other minorities safe, and they're not safe right now. So I was frustrated at the collapse. I was frankly frustrated that his allies didn't help him as much as I thought they should. And then I started reading some other people who have been following it pretty closely, and including people like Alistair Crook, who I think is one of the best analysts of the scene right now. And he just pointed out that for a long time, Assad has sort of lost interest. He was also shifting his alliances. He was again trying to get in the good graces of the West. Come on, man! They stab you in the back every single time. You should have learned your lesson. So I'm not perfect all the time, and I think my initial reaction, frustration and anger, has given way to understanding the nuances of how it happened and why it happened, and the forces like the U.S., Israel to a degree, but certainly Turkey, the forces making that happen, putting these people in power. The thing that disgusts me are people like Joe Wilson, the representative from South Carolina. When we were on the Hill, he would end every speech with, "We will never forget 9/11." Every day. And now he's out there praising literally the group that did 9/11, So it just shows that these are not the smartest guys in town who go into Congress.
Do they just not know, or do they not care? Sometimes I can't tell which it is.
Yeah, that's a good question. Probably a little bit of both. Don't confuse me with the facts. And I remember a lot of members, they did not want to read. They wanted their staff to give them 5 talking points, and that was it. They memorized those 5 talking points, one-liners. That's it.
Are you serious? So they didn't they just didn't understand the issues at all. They didn't feel like they needed to. It was just
where's my
that's so
talking point?
depressing. That's so depressing.
Yeah, it is. There were thoughtful people, but a lot of them were like that.
They were few and far between. One last question. I want to get on Iran for a bit. Like I pointed out that Joe Biden was talking about potentially hitting Iran. You had Trump who's talking about potentially hitting Iran. Do you think Iran made a mistake by not being more aggressive with Israelis' advance and attacks? Because at this point, because it's one thing if Iran thinks, okay, we're going to be able to make a deal with the West so we can avoid a larger war. That's not really what's happening. It seems like they've been able to marginalize all of the quote unquote resistance groups, whether it was Hezbollah, whether it's Gaza, whether it's the West Bank, whether it's Lebanon, Hezbollah. And now Iran is in the crosshairs, especially now that Syria has collapsed and Israel has just completely destroyed any notion of air defense that was in Syria in the first place, which means there is no hedge between Israel hitting Iran at this point, short of a potential Iranian response. But Iran has been very cagey and has shown itself to be, let's say, very concerned about any kind of response at all, especially now. Do you think they made a mistake by not being more aggressive as Israel went on this kind of killing spree in Lebanon, in Gaza, and the West Bank?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, both Iran and Russia are so fundamentally conservative when it comes to these things. I mean, the main opposition in Russia are people who are furious that Putin has slow walked this war. That's in their opinion, that he didn't go all in from day one. And my guess is there are people in Iran, and I know less about Iranian internal politics, but my guess is there are a lot of people that feel that way in Iran. because they did make that strike, and it was successful because it did things that were never done before. And so I imagine they would say, you had a chance, you had an opportunity. I will say that if the Iranians think they're going to make a deal with the neocons in the U.S., just take a look at not only Assad, but take a look at Gaddafi. Because once you're in the crosshairs, man, they never give up. They will never, ever give up. They don't have a reverse gear. They keep moving ahead, and they're in the driver's seat in America still. No matter who, as my old friend Tom Wood says, no matter who you vote for, they always elect John McCain, and that's what we have in the U.S. in foreign policy.
Listen, whoever you vote for, they always elect John McCain.
Yeah, you always get John McCain. Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of a neocon, Joe Biden just gave Liz Cheney an award. I think it was like one step below the Presidential Medal of Honor.
The sad thing is,
it's so sad. Yeah.
But people who are close to Cheney are now deep inside the new Trump administration. I don't get it. You know, I mean, a lot of people that were close to Cheney, that were close to Bolton. It's not the top people who you know their names, but they're there and they always survive. And that's why, you know, DC is the swamp really is the neocon swamp, and they never go away. And unfortunately, I hope for the best for Trump, but he has stacked the cards against himself if he truly wants to do what he said he wants to do, which is end the wars and don't start any. You don't do that by getting these kinds of people in these positions. So I hope it works out somehow.
Do you think he betrayed his base with these choices and these picks?
Well, let's see what he does when he gets in. You know, maybe he'll fire them all in the first week. I hope he does.
Somebody said that too. They said Trump doesn't have an issue firing people.
Yeah.
Those people are going to have their jobs after a year.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to condemn him before he even starts. And people will say, "Oh, you fool! You should know he's." Yeah, it's possibly true. Every politician does betray you, but I want to give the guy a chance. I want to be hopeful. Otherwise, why get up in the morning? You know, I hope he does the right thing. And if he does, we'll say, "Hey, that's great." You know, when Obama normalized relations with Cuba, we said this is great. When he did the Iran deal, we said this is great. A lot of his other foreign policy stuff is terrible, but these are two good things. So if Trump does some good things, we're going to praise him.
Daniel McAdams, man, thank you for this. I really appreciate you joining me, Daniel. Daniel McAdams, he's executive director of the Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity. You can learn more about Daniel's work at Ron Paul Institute for Peace and Prosperity by going to the ronpaulinstitute.org. And Daniel, man, you have a fantastic new year. Thank you for joining me, man. I really do appreciate you.
Thank you. You too.
All right. We